Hello and welcome to Quiz Class. I'm your host, Ellen, and today we have 100 questions on general knowledge. Let's take a look at our Quiz Class awards. And here they are. Make sure you're keeping score so you can tell us how you did in the comments at the end, along with the answer to the bonus question. So let's begin. Who sang the 1971 hit Maggie May? Billy Joel, Rod Stewart, or Eric Clapton? Rod Stewart. What 1954 Alfred Hitchcock film stars Grace Kelly as a socialite caught in a deadly intrigue? Dial M for Murder, To Catch a Thief, or North by Northwest? Dial M for Murder. In the novel Brave New World, which drug is used by citizens to maintain happiness? Ecstasy, Euphorin, or Soma? Soma. Which 1982 film featured the line, Phone Home? Starman, Cocoon, or E.T. the Extraterrestrial? E.T. the Extraterrestrial. What Shakespeare play begins with three witches on a heath? King Lear, Othello, or Macbeth? Macbeth. In To Kill a Mockingbird, what is the name of the reclusive neighbor the children fear? Tom Robinson, Boo Radley, or Bob Ewell? Boo Radley. Which 1983 film featured the phrase, Say hello to my little friend? Scarface, The Godfather Part 2, or Goodfellas? Scarface. Which 1961 film follows a group of teenagers in a small California town during a single day? American Graffiti, West Side Story, or Grease? West Side Story. Which 1980 film featured the first use of the term cyberspace? Tron, War Games, or The Empire Strikes Back? The Empire Strikes Back. Who had a 1975 hit with the song Love Will Keep Us Together? Simon and Garfunkel, Captain and Tennille, or The Carpenters? Captain and Tennille. Question 11. In which European country is the medieval city of Bruges located? France, Germany, or Belgium? Belgium. What novel, published in 1959, tells the story of teenage angst in post-war New York City? A Separate Peace, Catcher in the Rye, or The Bell Jar? The Bell Jar. Which 1973 musical film features the song The Time Warp? Hair, Cabaret, or The Rocky Horror Picture Show? The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Which 1959 Alfred Hitchcock thriller involves a man witnessing a murder from his apartment window? North by Northwest, Rear Window, or Vertigo? North by Northwest. Which classic 1954 Disney animated film features a bear cub learning about life in the jungle? Bambi, Dumbo, or The Jungle Book? The Jungle Book. In what U.S. state would you find the town of Roswell, famous for alleged UFO sightings? Nevada, New Mexico, or Arizona? New Mexico. Which jazz musician is famous for the albums Kind of Blue and Sketches of Spain? Miles Davis, John Coltrane, or Louis Armstrong? Miles Davis. Which 1981 science fiction film features a cyborg sent from the future to kill Sarah Connor? RoboCop, Alien, or The Terminator? The Terminator. Which novel by Margaret Atwood depicts a dystopian society where women are stripped of rights? The Handmaid's Tale, 1984, or The Road? The Handmaid's Tale. Which 1957 film follows the rivalry between two school gangs, the Jets and the Sharks? American Graffiti, West Side Story, or Grease? West Side Story. Which 1990s pop star had a hit with Girls Just Wanna Have Fun? Cyndi Lauper, Whitney Houston, or Madonna? Cyndi Lauper. In the 1969 film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the famous train jump scene used what unusual filming technique to heighten suspense? Handheld cameras, rotoscoping, or rear projection? Rear projection with miniatures. The 1973 oil crisis led to a surge in popularity for compact cars in America. Which Japanese model became an early symbol of this shift? The Datsun 510, the Honda Civic, or the Toyota Corolla? The Datsun 510. In literature, what unusual narrative technique is used in Catch-22 to illustrate the absurdity of bureaucracy? Epistolary format, circular storytelling, or first-person diary entries? Circular storytelling. Which 1980s film famously used a real Ferris wheel accident during filming to heighten tension in a carnival scene? Big, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or Something Wild? Something Wild. Which band recorded an album underwater in a swimming pool as part of a sound experiment in the late 1970s? The Police, the Beach Boys, or Fleetwood Mac? The Beach Boys. What literary work inspired a famous 1981 sci-fi film where a dystopian city is ruled by a sleeping elite who control the population's dreams? Blade Runner, Neuromancer, or Fahrenheit 451? Blade Runner. Which 1968 film used a real helicopter crash to create a dramatic chase scene? Bullet, The Green Berets, or The Italian Job? The Green Berets. What type of dance became popular in the 1920s? The foxtrot, the tango, or the Charleston? The Charleston. And we are at question 30. Which city hosted the 1972 Summer Olympics, infamous for a terrorist attack? Montreal, Mexico City, or Munich? Munich. What classic toy required players to escape a plastic dungeon with tiny marbles? Mousetrap, Labyrinth, or Operation? Labyrinth. Which 1963 film was almost banned in several U.S. cities due to its intense rooftop finale? The Birds, Psycho, or HUD? The Birds. Which car, introduced in 1955, became famous for being the first American vehicle with a V8 in a compact frame? The Ford Thunderbird, Chevrolet Corvette, or Pontiac Bonneville? The Chevrolet Corvette. Which musician released the 1971 album that blended rock and classical orchestration, shocking fans? The Moody Blues, Paul McCartney, or David Bowie? The Moody Blues. In 1974, a rare political maneuver allowed Gerald Ford to become president without winning an election. What happened? Nominated vice president, electoral tie, or Supreme Court decision? Nominated vice president. Which 1950s Hollywood film famously used shadows and mirrors to enhance its suspense scenes? On the Waterfront, Rear Window, or Vertigo? Vertigo. Which artist shocked the art world in 1962 by painting a giant, dripping American flag? Andy Warhol, Jasper Johns, or Roy Lichtenstein? Jasper Johns. Which 1985 movie included a car chase over a collapsing dam that was filmed without CGI? A View to a Kill, Lethal Weapon, or Mad Max? A View to a Kill. Which novel features a fictional town where the residents mysteriously stop aging? It was published in the 1960s. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Cat's Cradle, or Time and Again? Time and Again. Question 40. Which political first happened in 1967 involving a U.S. Senate seat? First African American elected, first female senator from a major party, or first senator under 30? First female senator from a major party. Which movie famously used a spinning hallway scene to simulate zero gravity in the 1980s? 2001: A Space Odyssey, Aliens, or Gravity? Aliens. Which 1970s band used an entire album to narrate a fictional futuristic dystopia? Queen, Genesis, or The Who? The Who. Which 1970s song featured a music video with puppets and stop-motion animation? Sledgehammer, Take on Me, or Thriller? Sledgehammer. Which political leader was famously known for his silent vetoes in the 1960s U.S. Senate? Richard Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, or Senator Everett Dirksen? Senator Everett Dirksen. Which 1980s movie used a live fire stunt with helicopters crashing into a skyscraper? Die Hard, RoboCop, or Lethal Weapon? RoboCop. Which car's appearance in a 1969 film chase scene cemented it as a cult classic? Chevrolet Camaro, Mini Cooper, or Pontiac Firebird? The Mini Cooper. Which political convention was delayed in 1972 due to an unexpected water pipe burst? Republican, Democratic, or Libertarian? Republican. Which band in the 1960s was famous for touring in a single bus called the Magic Bus? The Who, the Rolling Stones, or the Beach Boys? The Who. Which 1980s movie used live action and miniature sets to simulate a volcanic eruption? Volcano, Dante's Peak, or King Kong? Dante's Peak. And we have reached our halfway point, question 50. Which song's music video in the 1980s used a continuous track across a futuristic city? Take on Me, Sledgehammer, or Money for Nothing? Take on Me. Which 1970s film used a rooftop chase in Paris that became a template for future action movies? Mission Impossible, The Italian Job, or Bullet? The Italian Job. What car became a 1970s symbol of rebellion due to its frequent appearance in chase scenes? The Dodge Challenger, Chevrolet Camaro, or Ford Mustang Mach 1? The Ford Mustang Mach 1. Which 1980s song became infamous for having hidden backward messages? Living on a Prayer, Another One Bites the Dust, or Thriller? Another One Bites the Dust. Which political figure famously used a fireside chat-style speech in the 1940s to calm public fears? Franklin D. Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, or Dwight Eisenhower? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Which 1950s toy caused a national safety debate due to its small metal parts? Lincoln Logs, Tonka Trucks, or Tinker Toys? Tinker Toys. Which 1980s film included a stunt where a car drove through a building under construction? Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, or RoboCop? Lethal Weapon. Which 1970s car became famous for its smoking tailpipes in street racing culture? Plymouth Roadrunner, the Chevrolet Camaro, or the Dodge Challenger? The Plymouth Roadrunner. Which political first occurred in 1968 with a major U.S. party nomination? First African American nominee, first nominee under 40, or first nominee who was a sitting vice president? First nominee who was a sitting vice president. Which 1970s novel envisioned a world dominated by sleep manipulation and dystopia? 1984, Brave New World, or Logan's Run? Logan's Run. Question 60. What film tells the story of an enormous ape captured and brought to New York City? Dante's Peak, King Kong, or Volcano? King Kong. Which 1980s song used a continuous animated cityscape in its music video? Money for Nothing, Sledgehammer, or Take on Me? Take on Me. Which 1980s rock album used a 20-minute concept song about a dystopian future? Dark Side of the Moon, Operation Mindcrime, or The Wall? Operation Mindcrime. Which 1960s science fiction movie stunned audiences with a giant alien tripod? The Day the Earth Stood Still, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, or War of the Worlds? The Day the Earth Stood Still. Which 1970s movie features a character trapped in a snowbound cabin with a shape-shifting entity? Halloween, The Exorcist, or The Thing? The Thing. Which novel depicts a secret society manipulating global finance and media for decades? Angels and Demons, the Illuminatus trilogy, or The Firm? The Illuminatus trilogy. Which 1980s band created a music video entirely in claymation that became instantly iconic? Aha, Michael Jackson, or Peter Gabriel? Peter Gabriel. Which 1950s TV show introduced one of the first interracial friendships on American television? Amos and Andy, Leave It to Beaver, or I Love Lucy? Amos and Andy. Which 1980s film showcased a teen group discovering an alien spaceship in their small town? E.T., The Explorers, or The Goonies? Explorers. Which 1980s novel depicted a dystopian world where teenagers are trained as elite assassins in a corrupt society? The Chocolate War, Ender's Game, or The Running Man? The Chocolate War. Which 1960s artist became famous for painting distorted portraits of celebrities with bold colors? Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, or Francis Bacon? Francis Bacon. Which 1970s car was designed for endurance racing and became a cult favorite in Europe? Lancia Stratos, Ferrari Dino, or the Porsche 911? The Lancia Stratos. Which 1950s music artist was known as the Queen of Rockabilly? Patsy Cline, Wanda Jackson, or Brenda Lee? Wanda Jackson. Which 1960s film features a secret agent decoding messages hidden in microfilm? The Impress File, Thunderball, or Goldfinger? The Ipcress File. Which 1970s toy became notorious for causing injuries due to its sharp spinning parts? Easy Bake Oven, Slinky, or the Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle? The Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle. Which 1980s novel explored a society where memories can be bought and sold? Total Recall, Brave New World, or Neuromancer? Total Recall. Which 1970s political first involved live satellite broadcasts for an international summit? The NATO treaty signing, the UN General Assembly, or Apollo-Soyuz test project? The Apollo-Soyuz test project. Which 1950s TV show inspired countless space-based sci-fi series? Adventures of Superman, Tom Corbett Space Cadet, or Captain Video? Tom Corbett Space Cadet. Which 1980s song is famous for combining rap with rock, influencing a generation of crossover hits? Walk This Way, Sweet Child of Mine, or Billie Jean? Walk This Way. Which 1970s political crisis involved the kidnapping of diplomats in the Middle East? The Yom Kippur War, Camp David, or the Iran hostage crisis? The Iran hostage crisis. We have reached question 80. Which 1980s literary work satirized the fast food culture and hyper-commercialism of America? Ready Player One, Jennifer Government, or Neuromancer? Jennifer Government. Which 1980s film featured a character shrinking down to microscopic size to enter a human body? Inner Space, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, or Tron? Inner Space. Which 1970s book explored the psychology of a Vietnam War veteran returning home? The Deer Hunter, Going After Cacciato, or Catch-22? Going After Cacciato. Which 1950s novel focused on the lives of women navigating post-war domestic life? Peyton Place, Revolutionary Road, or The Feminine Mystique? Peyton Place. Which 1970s song became an anthem for disco culture worldwide? Staying Alive, Le Freak, or I Will Survive? I Will Survive. Next up, which 1980s literary work satirized corporate greed in the digital age? Microsurfs, Snow Crash, or Neuromancer? And the answer is Microsurfs. Which 1950s toy inspired children to explore engineering through nuts, bolts, and girders? Tinker Toy, Lego, or Erector Set? Erector Set. Which 1960s movie used innovative color filters and psychedelic cinematography to portray a spy thriller? The Ipcress File, Goldfinger, or the Thomas Crown Affair? The Thomas Crown Affair. Which 1980s musician combined rap and rock with Aerosmith in a groundbreaking music video? Run DMC, Rick Rubin collaboration, or LL Cool J? Rick Rubin collaboration. Which 1950s TV show followed a rural family adjusting to city life, inspiring many spin-offs? I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, or The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet? The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Question 90. Which 1970s movie shocked audiences with a climactic chase through San Francisco's hills? The French Connection, Bullet, or Dirty Harry? Dirty Harry. Which 1980s novel depicted a dystopian world dominated by televised game shows and surveillance? Neuromancer, The Running Man, or Brave New World? The Running Man. Which 1950s music artist is known for the hit Rock Around the Clock? Chuck Berry, Little Richard, or Bill Haley and His Comets? The answer is Bill Haley and His Comets. Which 1980s movie featured an arcade champion fighting for his life inside a video game world? Tron, The Last Starfighter, or War Games? The Last Starfighter. Which 1970s toy allowed kids to control cars with radio signals for the first time? Slot Car Track, Hot Wheels, or RC Cars? RC Cars. Which 1970s song became synonymous with roller disco culture? Boogie Wonderland, I Will Survive, or Stayin' Alive? Boogie Wonderland. Which 1950s book was groundbreaking for its critique of 50s suburban conformity and gender roles? Rebel Without a Cause, Peyton Place, or The Feminine Mystique? The Feminine Mystique. Which 1970s TV show became a landmark for portraying a black family living in Chicago? Good Times, Sanford and Son, or Julia? Julia. Which 1950s political first involved the first televised presidential campaign? The Kennedy campaign, the Truman campaign, or the Eisenhower campaign? The Eisenhower campaign. Which 1960s movie featured a dystopian future with a society controlled by a secret police? West Side Story, Fahrenheit 451 or A Clockwork Orange? A Clockwork Orange. And we are at question 100. Which 1960s political summit brought superpowers together to reduce nuclear tensions? Camp David, Cuban Missile Crisis negotiations, or the Paris peace talks? The Cuban Missile Crisis negotiations. And for our bonus question, which 1970s film features a cop in a dirty, crime-ridden city famous for a car chase on elevated roads? Let us know the answer in the comments and, of course, how well you did with our Quiz Class Einstein rewards. Thanks for playing, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.